So, leaving the dock for the day, for a day sail, and leaving the dock for an offshore passage are two different animals. Hank Schmidt from Offshore Passage Opportunities is going to tell us a few of the things that he does to get the boat ready and safe for an offshore passage. And of course, Patrick Childers will be in there with some supplementary tips as well. Also, he is going to tell you about his new invention, a reef hook for the mainsail. So let's go.
Okay, we're at the pointy end of the boat, of course known as the bow, and we're going to talk about the way to secure your anchor. When you're coastal sailing, you have very little chance of your anchor coming unsecured. There are no waves that are going to take the bow and try and take the anchor off of its anchor perch and have it smash into the boat. Swans were particularly lucky because they have a great anchor mechanism, a lock, right here, which keeps the anchor in place. So when I need it, I would just undo that and be ready to deploy. But again, most boats do not have a system like that. You'll see they might have a pin going through just to hold it. But before you go offshore, you really want to take a line, a couple of sail ties, and really whip it down, tie it down tight so you avoid waves hitting and lifting the anchor up. So on this boat, again, very easy, very secure lock, so nothing's going to hurt it, and it's going to stay secured. And if you don't have a system like this, I'm going to get on board and go around to the other end, and you'll see how we have the shank tied to the side, so even though this is secured, it's not going to bounce up and down. So again, coastal sailing, you're fine the way your anchor's set up, but once you go offshore, you really want to tie it down, lash it down very, very well to make sure she stays in place. The last thing you want to do is try and anchor in 200 or 300 feet of water and have your anchor all the way down, or if it just falls a couple of feet and is banging against your hull and you have to send somebody forward to get it. So again, before you leave the dock, make sure she's really secured well.
Our Valiant 40 is set up with a dual bow roller assembly, so we always have two anchors up on the bow. Well, maybe not always, I'll tell you more about that in a second. But we have a wire that comes over the top and gets shackled back to the bow roller assembly to hold the shank in place. And then on the very end of each shank, that gets tied to a cleat. We don't rely just on the anchor chain over the windlass to hold everything in place. If we are on an ocean passage or expecting bad weather while coastal sailing, we will take the number 2 anchor and just move it all the way back and tie it down on the deck just in front of the coach roof. We don't need all of that resistance way up there on the bow with waves trying to rip those anchors off of their fittings. I think a great number of experienced cruisers would agree that a plow type anchor is not the best choice. However, in a dual bow roller assembly like this, a CQR anchor, plow anchor like this, is generally the only thing that'll fit the anchor puzzle so that two anchors can fit side by side. We just put on our boat this Manson Boss anchor, B-O-S-S, and it fits very nicely side by side with the Manson Supreme. But I think what we'll have to do is make the Boss our primary anchor and move the Supreme to the number 2 backup position. And of course, anytime we're crossing oceans, we'll take the number 2 anchor and stow it on deck just in front of the coach roof and reduce the amount of wave resistance on these anchors as much as possible.
Okay, another tip, we have Pelican hooks and the lifeline gates. Again, most people will open them up, and if you just leave them on the deck, of course somebody could step on them, scratch the decks or the teak or something like that. So what I always tell people do, get in the habit of clipping them back into the lifeline, like so. What that does, it prevents, if you'll see, these just screw on and off. They cost about $60 a piece, so you really don't want to lose it. So you just get in the habit of taking both your gates, taking them when you're at the dock, and closing them. That way they can't accidentally spin off on you. And again, nobody's going to go ahead and step on them and damage the teak. And then a tip that I do, which is nice to keep you on deck, is when you do go offshore, and again, I don't do this when I'm just going out day sailing for a couple of hours, but if I'm going to go offshore, I'll open up the gates Go ahead and close them. So a closer look at the Pelican hook, you can see they're adjustable, so you can get that on all right. And then you have the cotter ring there. And then again, we tape over the Pelican hook, because the idea is, this is the cotter ring and I've taken one off, your jib sheets or other lines can wrap onto the ring and hook into there and pull that ring off. Again, the force of the jib sheet, so all of a sudden your gate snaps open. So again, with it taped shut, so we close it, depress it, and then we take our tape and we just do one wrap around. Again, not around and around and around. It's just to keep it from opening that little bit, and then I fold it over to make it easy to get rid of later on. But that way, if the line catches your cotter ring and pulls it out, it's still not going to open up your hook, and you're still safe from that opening up and so something going overboard.
I double checked with Hank, and he said in decades using this method, he has never once had that Pelican hook open up on him. However, if somebody felt more comfortable putting some wraps around the pull ring, go right ahead.
So when you get to Bermuda and it's time to take, it's real easy to open them up again. Take it off, clip it back into itself. You'll never lose them. You'll never put a scratch in your teak or your deck, and nobody will go overboard because they're secured for going offshore. So again, just another little simple tip. Easy to do, easy to incorporate into your habits. Another small tip, although at port it doesn't seem very important, but offshore would be a major problem, is something as simple as just leaving the top up on your suds. Because again, everything moves around at sea, goes into there, and all of a sudden all your soap slowly spills out and you have no dish soap, and you're in the middle of a transatlantic, and of course there's no convenience store to go get some more. What I do is I just buy them in smaller sizes. Certainly if you're going to do a really long trip, you can get a big one and just keep refilling the small ones, or you can just get some boats will actually have a soap dispenser or something that's built into the galley. So of course then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
A soap dispenser like this is easy enough to install. Just drill the right size hole and then you screw it up from the bottom and you're ready to go. The trick is getting one that lasts. If you go to the home center and get one of those soap dispensers that is chromed, the chroming will come off in about a year, year and a half, and it'll look terrible. This one is stainless steel. It's very expensive. It was very difficult to find, but it'll last a very long time. It's been in here for at least 6 years. And with this, we don't spill any soap. We just don't have any problems with bottles falling over.
Okay, we're back in the aft head to show another similar small problem that could turn into a major problem. A lot of boats run with their water pressure pump off. That way you don't have to worry about a hose breaking, losing all your water. If your engine's running, you wouldn't hear it. Offshore would be a big problem. You go to use the aft head and you don't get water, or you run out and you leave it up in this up position. Again, doesn't seem like a big deal, but what happens if somebody up by the nav station puts on the water pressure pump and goes to use the forward head? We'll see what happens. Using the forward head or turning the water pressure pump on, use the head, and we'd be losing water back here. And it has happened to me on a trip where somebody left the faucet on in the wrong part, in a different header somewhere. We put the switch on for the water pump, and because the engine was running, we didn't hear the water pump run, and we lost all our water. Again, not a big deal if you're coastal sailing, but if you're out in the ocean and you lose a bunch of your fresh water overboard because somebody left the tap up. So again, just always be careful, always make sure, even if no water's coming out, to always leave all your tabs down and off.
One day we'll do a video on granny bars. Tremendous safety item. I wish we would have put these things on years ago. But right now I want to show you our custom reef hook. So I'm going to take the sail cover off and we'll go over to the port side of the boat. Come on over and take a look at this reefing hook. This part of the sail is called the dog bone. And these are the dog bone rings for reefing purposes. I like to use 2 rings on the reefing hook because it holds the tack of the sail closer to the boom and it just gives me a little better shape. I don't think it really matters. I could go with just 1 ring, but it raises it much higher. But the problem had always been I would have to hold on to these rings try to raise the sail with my left hand. Then all of a sudden, the lurch of the boat makes me drop my hand from these rings because I have to hang on to the mast and continue to hoist the sail. And the whole time, these things are falling off. And I'm right back to where I started. If I'm lucky, just one ring stays on and I can go ahead and hoist, and I just let it go at that. So I finally took a spear gun head, like this one, ground down the rivet that holds the two barbs on to free up the barbs, and then I came back to the reef hook and ground flat spots in the reef hook so I could attach the barb and use a stainless steel rivet to hold the barb on. So now it's impossible for these dog bone rings to come off. I can use one, I can use two, and no problem. So what's nice about this is that now when I go in to put a second reef, this will not come off. It'll always be ready to use in the first reef position. So let me show you this starboard side and how I set up then the second reef. Coming around to the port side, in Sri Lanka, I made another reef hook which is the mirror image of the port side reef hook. It has to be out and away from the mast, so when the boom comes over, this part doesn't get hit up against the mast. The strange thing about this reef hook is I wanted 316 stainless steel. It took about a month and a half before it was totally rusty. And the weird thing is there's absolutely no attraction to the magnet. So it's some kind of stainless steel that rusts easily. If anybody has any information on this that can tell me about it, that would be great. I tried to replace this reef hook here in Richards Bay, but nobody easily could make this tight bend. So maybe when we get down to Cape Town, I'll have a new one made. I sanded this all down and then primed it with 2-part primer. So that'll hold me for a while until I can get a new one made. So reef hooks with a barb. I wish I would have had this decades ago.
So what other clever things do you do when you go on an offshore passage? Leave those comments in the comment section down below. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give us a thumbs up. And if you love the video, leave us a tip in the tip jar. Hey, thanks for watching. See you next time.